Okay, so I've just came out of the David hearing once again. We heard basically a lot of forensic evidence this afternoon. I did do a very brief update, a little short update for you guys earlier, but now I've kind of got all of the details, and it was a good solid few hours with various pathologists and criminalists, field investigators, all kinds of people. And really, as I sort of touched on in my previous short update, what we're dealing with this time is just very, it seems like just really dumb stuff. I mean, it seemed like the house, the garage was covered in blood. The Tesla, inside the Tesla was covered in blood. Not just the front trunk where the body was unfortunately found, but also the rear trunk underneath the trunk liner. That was also apparently covered in, they said they couldn't necessarily, okay, let me explain this because this is going to be very important. The person who was testifying, the criminalist, basically says that they spray kind of a material on the scene onto a surface, and that will basically glow a certain color, and then that basically gives a close indication of blood, but they then have to collect those stains, that material, send it to the lab for DNA testing. So nobody there today could definitively say it was definitely blood, but I'm sure that we're going to get to that testimony later. We haven't gotten to anybody from the lab to kind of give that information as to where those samples actually ended up and what came back. But what we did hear was that they had sprayed a bunch of surfaces in the car, in the very rear third row seats of the Tesla Model X, blood all over the side panels. It looked like, they were trying to infer, but they couldn't quite say outright, but it looked like what had happened was perhaps, you know, I hate to say it, but I can only assume from the diagrams and the images that we'd seen is that maybe, I mean, maybe Celeste at some point after being stabbed was placed in that third row, and there was unfortunately a lot of material that they said was likely blood on that third row, also in the trunk underneath the trunk liner. So again, it seems like very likely a bleeding body was transported in the trunk underneath the rear trunk liner before those bags were placed into the front trunk. Now, we heard about, you know, nearly a dozen air fresheners that were kind of littered all around the car, not just around the car, but in the bag that was in the front trunk. David had apparently tried to put air fresheners in there, like that was going to help a body that had been decomposing for damn near 5 months. There was the center console had a bunch of air fresheners. There were air fresheners in the back of the car. There were air fresheners, those ones that you plug into the vents. And for this guy to really think that you could basically use air fresheners to cover up a body that had been in the car for months is lunacy. I could not believe that that's really the route that he went. And he just sat there stone-faced through the whole thing, just basically no reaction, looking at the screen, looking at the evidence that was really damning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of like take you through some of these details, some of the evidence that was kind of you know, captured there. I'm going to do like I did before. I'm going to hand the camera over and I'm going to grab hold of my notes with both hands. So basically, there was a whole lot of updates from these criminalists. So criminalists from the LAPD's kind of field investigation unit. They're basically scientific investigators that have worked for years. They gave their names. So I'm not going to give you the people's names just for privacy reasons. I just don't think it's worth it. Doesn't really change anything to give you their names. So I don't want anyone to get in touch or look them up or anything like that. But there was one scientific investigator that had worked for them for 7 years. They conduct field investigations as part of a unit that basically responds to vehicle searches. They gather and preserve evidence, trained in forensic science, been to over 230 crime scenes, and for the sake of accuracy, a vehicle can be a crime scene in this context. So we don't know 230 scenes, that could be 230 vehicles, 100 vehicles, 100 different crime scenes. This person's been to hundreds of scenes and given this kind of testimony just countless times. Okay, this really was an expert, a professional that was qualified on the collection of biological evidence, and they basically said that they responded on September the 9th, 2025, along with a secondary criminalist who was also named. So they were the primary criminalist, they came with a secondary criminalist, and they went to a lockup where David's Tesla was taken after it was discovered at the tow yard. So it was taken there, they confirmed that it was the same car, same license plate, same Texas tags, and they basically pointed out a lot of details. They showed pictures of the car in the lockup. The car was covered in a layer of dust that kind of coated the entire vehicle. They said that the vehicle smelled of a decomposing body, and that was something that the criminologists basically could confirm based on their experience of having smelled decomposing bodies before. That's what it was, even though the body would have been removed at this point. The remaining car unfortunately did continue to smell like a decaying body afterwards. So I looked inside, found significant insect activity in the front trunk. We saw some more images of that trunk, as well as kind of some of the aftermath, so like the state that the vehicle was left in afterwards. We saw 5 different pictures of the car that showed multiple air fresheners in the cabin, in the front, in the bag that was found in the car. Basically, he really thought that air fresheners could be used to cover up the smell, which was just absolutely absurd. So it wasn't clear to me whether those photos were taken, maybe it was a combination. I wasn't entirely sure whether those photos were taken kind of like before or after, or a combination of before it was towed, when it was at the lockup, because we saw pictures of the air fresheners in their original spots. We saw an image of the front trunk that seemed to have a bag in it that had remains in it with an air freshener. This was horrible, but they described the air freshener as basically, they pointed it out with a stick and described the air freshener as basically buried beneath maggots in the bag in the trunk, which is just horrendous, the frunk. In addition to that, we then saw kind of all of the air fresheners gathered up, I guess, after kind of the investigation had taken place and placed on the seat. So then we saw like it was about 11 air fresheners of different sorts, those little Christmas tree shaped ones, those ones that you can plug into the front vents of your car. All of those, all basically laid out on the front passenger seat. And what was really creepy is next to all of that stuff was, I guess, a bumper sticker that you had in the car. And it said, "Love is in the air." It was just such a creepy detail. It was just horrible seeing all these air fresheners in that context that had been gathered up along with this, I guess, bumper sticker. They didn't make reference to that sticker, but it was there in the image. And I just thought, I wrote that down, just thought, love is in the air is just creepy. So we had a brief lunch after that. We came back. That's when I recorded my last video, and you know, all of this stuff happened afterwards. So those very brief details about the air freshener I already had when I last spoke to you guys. But after that, they basically did some updates. So before we got back to the testimony, there was kind of some housekeeping in the courtroom, and they basically, you know, had some conversations. They basically said they wanted to kind of lower the amount of laptops being used, a little bit too many laptops being used. And what's very, very interesting is the civil lawyer for Celeste's family was admonished by the judge because apparently he had a laptop, but because he's not media, he's actually not supposed to be using a laptop. Apparently, there was a comment that was made outside the courtroom where he was basically told, yeah, you're not supposed to have a laptop, and he'd made some comment apparently to the judge in the hallway or something. I've not seen the judge in the hallway at any point, but they must have crossed paths. Apparently he made like a flippant comment saying like, oh, is that your rule or is that the court's rule? Some like little snarky comment that he made, and the judge was pissed. Hauled Celeste's family's civil lawyer in front of the criminal court, in front of everybody, and admonished him and basically put him in front of everyone and said he needs to communicate more respectfully in the courtroom. She basically made an example out of him in front of everybody and just said, look, the no laptops rule, you're not media, you're not press. We think people could be using their laptops to record. Unless you're accredited press, you cannot have your laptop in there. Now, I was, to be honest, I found that when I had my laptop yesterday, obviously I did have a press pass and I was allowed in as part of the press kind of overflow section. But I actually found I preferred writing handwritten notes. So after that point, they were like, look, we're going to cut down on the laptops. I was like, I'm cool. I'm going handwritten notes from now on. I'd much prefer to do it that way anyway. So I was kind of okay with that. But that was kind of a very interesting... I'm not going to lie, they brought Celeste's civil family lawyer in front of everybody and like really marked him out in front of everyone. That was insane. They said if anybody's caught recording, don't care if it's meta glasses, your phone in your bag, your laptop, you'll be ejected from the court and you'll be banned from the whole proceeding. No David trial, no nothing, no more dates for you. You're cooked if you get caught recording in there. So, I mean, for anybody that comes down to the court, do not do that, all right? No secret device, no hidden micro. I'm not going to lie, I ain't going to say too much, but like, I kind of like, sometimes you just don't even realize, you're thinking, oh shit, like I've got a device, maybe like, fortunately, every time I've given myself a thorough check before I've gone through the metal detector and make sure I've got my devices. You put your phone into a sealed bag. I'm not gonna lie, there were a few phones going off here, there in the court, so it did seem like the judge and even the lawyers were getting a little bit tired of, you know, phones going off, bottles getting knocked over. There was like a few little mini disruptions in the courtroom and people were getting a little bit pissed off. But anyway, there was quite a few bit of back and forths between the defense, so Blair Burke and Beth Silverman. Now, basically, Blair was objecting to the pathologist that had put up a PowerPoint presentation, basically said, oh, we haven't been provided this PowerPoint presentation. Beth said, we gave you this whole presentation weeks ago. This is exactly what you knew you were going to have, and it's just easier to show you this in the form of a PowerPoint presentation. That's basically what we're going to be doing. So from there, they basically explained that, like, that, you know, they basically explained later on, there was kind of some more back and forth between them. So apparently later on they revealed that apparently Beth and Blair had a different trial on a whole different topic that had been really spicy and fierce and bitter, And basically, they were kind of fresh off of a whole nother beef about a different case. And so the judge was basically like, right, we need to simmer down between you guys because you guys are getting at each other's throats. You got a pre-existing beef carried over from other cases. We need to calm that down. So that was interesting. But once all that was gotten out of the way, we kind of continued on from where we were. So I'm going to grab hold of the camera real quick. And I'm also going to retrieve a little drink from my bag because I feel like I'm talking at a million miles an hour. But basically, there was kind of like all these details. Could you open that for me, please? Sorry, thanks, man. There was basically all these little details that kind of came across, and like it was just so much. I was writing notes at an insane speed. So after that, basically, what ended up happening next was kind of like. We continued on with the pathologist, I guess is what you would call it. Criminalist, actually, is what they were called. But basically, like, there was this kind of back and forth about the PowerPoint. It really wasn't that important, so they kind of continued on after that. We continued looking at these pictures of the air fresheners, pictures inside the frunk. We saw these horrible close-ups of, like, I'm kind of squeamish when it comes to the bugs and shit as well. So it was, like, insects, maggots, dead flies, live flies. Beth basically asked for the criminalist. I might just start calling them a CSI because it sounds like that's what they were, like crime scene investigator, CSI kind of forensic analysis type person. But basically they showed sort of pictures of the empty Tesla, all of the kind of insects and stuff in there. The frunk had insects inside it, around the edges. They actually even said that they searched the outside of the car for touch DNA. So they basically didn't do much analysis of outside of the car, but one thing that they did actually do was they basically tested the part of the frunk that you would use your hand on to close. If you've ever seen a Tesla frunk, it doesn't have a handle. It kind of, I guess, I've not got a Tesla, so I wouldn't know, but it's like, it pops open. I guess you use the app or whatever to pop it open. You sort of lift it up from under the lid, and then you push it down, you put your hand on the frunk and just slam it down. So they did kind of do an analysis of outside. They didn't give any results to that. I guess they probably didn't find anything by the sounds of it, but they basically explained like everything that they touched on, everything that they looked into. So after that, they basically tested the stains for blood. So they have different chemical tests that they can do. One's called phenolphthalein. It was a very big word. If I'm getting that wrong, apologies. But they basically have like the phenolphthalein test and the blue star test, and they can basically kind of check stains, and they'll kind of come up under a sort of UV light, and that will be basically be able to like allow them to determine kind of whether or not it's likely that blood's there. Now, it doesn't fully confirm blood's presence. It basically said if the test is positive, then they think that there's a likelihood that there's blood there. But what that means is they then have to take an actual sample of whatever that material is where it tested positive, take it to a lab to do a full-blown DNA test. And the thing about that is we're probably going to be hearing about that over the next day or two if this ends up going for more than another day. It's scheduled to go one more day, but there's rumors it could be dragging on to a whole other day. But basically, they're going to send that to a lab, see if it matches the DNA of the victim as well as actually being blood. So they basically said that it was like you see in a movie. They actually said in movies they call this stuff luminol, but that's not what it's called. And they kept referring to it as like blue star. So they said that they basically, they showed pictures of blood stains in the bottom of the trunk, under the trunk liner, in the back of the car. So it wasn't just front trunk, Tesla front trunk that we were hearing about, but also in the back of the car. Looked like there was tons of blood there, and they said it's latent blood that the eye can't see. So they kind of spray it with this substance, and after that, they're then basically able to kind of see it glow, sort of glow in the dark kind of thing. So the rear trunk under the liner looked like it was covered in blood. There was blood in the rear trunk. There was blood in the third row seating section on one side of the car. So if I had to guess, look, I'm just going to have a guess. If I had to guess, I wonder whether maybe David had taken her to the back seat of the car and committed the murder, or perhaps even stored the body in the back seat of the car and then moved it to the trunk, or whether the blood leaked from the back seat of the car into the bottom liner of the trunk. Bottom line was there was blood all over the back of the car in the third row and in the back trunk, and then obviously the body was found in the front trunk. So that was all kind of shown through pictures, just loads of stuff, and they had to be careful. They referred to it as possibly blood. They didn't say, look, we can't 100% definitively say this is blood. We see this as possibly blood. We see this as something we send to the lab for kind of further analysis, and we take things further from there. But they kept saying, look, possibly blood, possibly blood. And that was basically all the defense had to go on. They had to keep saying, okay, we're going to kind of like just focus on that. We're basically just going to, say it's possibly, you don't know for sure, you don't know for sure. That's not going to look too good if we come to court tomorrow and then they have lab results saying, yeah, this was all blood. This all has DNA. this is Celeste's DNA. And there's not really going to be anything to argue with that. So I would say that it was honestly just a damning day. It was extremely bad. Let's see what's going on with this. So that was no good. They basically kind of showed like a whole diagram. Like I made my own little version of diagram. I don't know if you can see that, but it was like of the car basically. Can you see that? And like where the blood was found and that sort of thing. So I'm not really the greatest artist in the world, but I tried to just reproduce that so I could understand it. So when the defense took over the questioning, when Blair took over the questioning, I'm not going to lie, for the rest of the afternoon, I feel like she was clutching at straws. There wasn't really too much for her to go on. She was basically just trying to pick holes in the fact that, you know, like, it was like really minor semantic things that she was trying to pick into, like what time did you get to the tow yard, who got there first, did the detectives get there before you? She seemed to like just keep going around in circles of this thing of like, well, did the main detectives go there first? Did you wear gloves? And to be honest, all of the answers kind of cooked her. It was like, did you wear gloves? Yeah, we did. Did you wear a mask? Yeah, we do wear a mask. The one thing was like, do you wear goggles? No, we don't wear goggles. It was kind of just like, bro, you really just reaching for anything that you can grab hold of at this point, and there wasn't much really to go from. It was kind of like, oh, you arrived after the main detectives, yeah? So what? Like, that was really it. So it basically was like, so you were told the day before the body was removed from the car in bags, and it was like, yes. And it was kind of like, okay, was the front trunk open when you got there? And she was like, no, we opened it halfway through. You know, was your job to collect evidence? Did you wear PPE? There really wasn't anything. Did you swab the outside of the car? Yeah, we swabbed the edge of the trunk. I thought she was drowning, to be honest with you. You know, there's been moments where she's been very good in this trial, but I felt like that she was really just not doing too well. They said, you know, no traces of DNA or blood on the outside of the car. No, yes. So what? The car's full of blood. Blair kind of did a lot of random stuff she focused on. She was like, oh, did you notice there was loads of damage to the back of the car? She was like, yeah. Did you notice there was damage to the front and the side of the car? She's like, yeah, there was like, a bit of damage on the fender. There was like a panel hanging off. And it was kind of like, so? Like, what? So what? There wasn't really anything to that. Let me hand this over to you because I'm going to keep going from my notes. There's like a press conference going on over there, but right now I'm not too interested in what they've got going on. I believe that's Celeste's family lawyer kind of probably talking about getting admonished, but I saw it and told you what happened already, so he's probably going to give his own take on that. But anyway, she was focusing on the most random stuff. Dents in the car, tape on the spoiler of the vehicle. Basically went on to ask, you know, how does the phenolphthalein spray work? She basically says you spray the blood, it goes bright pink, brightens up under dark light. It's presumptive positive for blood, but we have to send it to a DNA lab to confirm it. She said, I cannot confirm blood at the scene, that's not how it works. And then Blair just kind of focused on that, so you can't say you confirm blood. You can't say you can confirm blood. And it's like, yeah, she's saying she sprayed it, it looked like there was potentially blood, and that's going to go to the lab, and then we're going to probably hear from the lab later this week. So the thing it almost like, I'll be honest, this is my opinion, but it almost seemed like she was more putting on a show to make it look like she was putting in work for David, but the points she was making, I'd say, were no good. Kept saying you can't say when these stains were created, and they were like, well, you know, we sprayed them, we took pictures of them, you know, we saw the possible blood stains in the trunk, and she was like, oh, you can't say how those stains got there. And it was kind of like, yeah, like, can't say how the stains got there, that's not my job. It's not my job to say it's blood, it's not my job to say how the stains got there, it's my job to spray it and say if there might be blood, and send that off to somebody to confirm it's DNA, you know, approved blood. So I feel like she was just looking for absolute randomness. There was even when I say she was clutching at straws, she was even like, was there a photo with a blue rectangle drawn around it? Were these enhanced with Photoshop? And then she basically showed like an image that basically like had a blue square around it, and she was like, is there Photoshop on this one? And Beth objected to that. The judge kind of sustained it and basically said, look, you keep using the word Photoshop, but the reality is, it's like, they basically said in the report we used an image enhancement software to make the image look more like it would have looked to the natural eye when we were there. That's it. And they're saying that I resent the continuous use of the term Photoshop. You're trying to make it look like we doctored the images when really we just used the software to kind of make it easy for you to see on a piece of paper or in a presentation. And she said, I don't know what software it was. I couldn't say Photoshop. You keep saying Photoshop. They basically said, was there any blood found in the interior other than the blood right at the back on the back 3 rows? There was no blood in the front 4 seats. Again, so what? There's blood all in the back in both of the trunks. It was... she didn't have a leg to stand on, and then she just rested her case at that point. After that, Beth kind of basically just said, was there editing by the lab photographer, not you? Did you enhance the photo? They basically said, yeah, we enhanced the photo, we don't change anything, we don't add anything, we don't take anything away. All we do is make it look more accurate to the human eye, like the images we took at the scene. That is it. They said this is normal protocol all across America. Basically said, it is what it is. That was it. And it was just kind of like, Blair spent so long trying to go down this line of this Photoshop, and then it was just like, this is just a normal thing. They all do this. There's nothing really to that. That was it. And that kind of ended dramatically. They brought in another criminalist from the LAPD Forensic Science Department, who's basically been working as a field investigator for 9 years. By the way, can you see the camera battery on there?
It's at 10.
It's at 10, okay, we got time, we're gonna finish this video off. So basically, this woman was kind of working in the same capacity, but she searched David's property. So when they actually went to David's house on September the 17th and searched the garage, she was the one spraying the place up with Blue Star, and they found blood everywhere. So she had like very, very deep experience working for various companies and for the authorities as a criminalist, basically finding out this information and working with crime scenes. This was all about bloodstains, basically. Sprayed a whole bunch of surfaces, and we saw all of the pictures. His garage was full of blood. So what it was on the floor, they had those kind of like gym mats, the sort of interlocking rubber floor mats that you can get. Those were basically covered in blood. They lifted those up and looked at the brickwork underneath. That was covered in blood when they sprayed it. There was a trash bag filled with wet wipes. All of the wet wipes covered in brown material that likely was blood. We're gonna obviously hear the DNA results on a lot of this stuff, but bear in mind we saw pictures of it looking normal. Like the brickwork on the floor wasn't covered in red stains. It looked normal. It had clearly been scrubbed and cleaned, but then when they sprayed it and did the black light on it, carved a giant blood stain, not just on the brickwork but the rubber matting that was on top of it. And they said it's likely that the blood even seeped through that. They also basically talked about the chainsaws. They basically admitted, yeah, the chainsaws didn't have blood on them, but they had the blue kiddie pool, which also tested for not just blood, but also it had linear cuts in it that they couldn't say it was consistent with a chainsaw, but they basically said that it had been cut with sharp instruments and it had chunks missing. Obviously, we had heard that there was blue plastic in Celeste's limbs. So sorry to have to say it that way, but that's what they told us. And she said there were parts missing. The cuts in the blue kiddie pool, they didn't line up perfectly like incisions. There were chunks missing. It was jagged. And they basically said, they didn't say chainsaw, but they basically said, look, chunks were missing. They tested for positive blood. They tested for possible blood. It was positive, phenol positive for possible blood. And there was red stains just all over the rubber mats, the brickwork, the kiddie pool, the garbage bags that had all the wet wipes in it. And even there was a rowing machine in the garage that had possible blood that lit up under the phenol test. It also, the Tesla supercharger that he had to charge his car had tested positive for possible blood. So all of this was numbered. They said the Blue Star was glowing all over the place, absolutely loads of possible blood absolutely everywhere, all over the floor, the mats. It was consistent with basically blood seeping through. The trash bag tested positive for blood. The chainsaws were clean and they left those behind. They said we photographed the chainsaws in their original position, we moved them, took more pictures, we left them behind when there was no blood and DNA on it. And again, this was kind of like another red herring where it was like, those two chainsaws, forget about those chainsaws. The real Mikata chainsaw that was allegedly used, seems like it's long gone, and that was allegedly the one that was used. And these two unused chainsaws, they're like a complete distraction. So basically, from there, apparently there were big tarpaulins, a green one and a black one. They tested phenol positive too for possible blood. They laid out those tarps for examination. They sprayed Blue Star on them, numerous red stains. All of the stuff at the garage was just a horror show. Blood everywhere, on everything, possible blood. So basically, like, the pool was, the kiddie pool was crumpled up into a ball. Apparently it had a fresh laundry liner in it, like a one of those little white things that you put in your laundry, I guess, to stop it color rubbing. And they said that the actual kiddie pool smelt like fresh laundry. Sounded like they had actually put that kiddie pool into like a domestic laundry or something like that, or washed it with laundry detergent, because that's how they said that it smelt. But it was clean. We saw a picture of it with no visible blood, but obviously it tested positive and under the UV light covered in blood as well. So basically there was another little beef between Beth and Blair after the break. They came back, they were kind of going at each other again. There was like a little beef about Beth wanted to take a picture of one of the exhibits that Blair had. Blair said you're not allowed to take pictures. Really what it sounded like is she had an unredacted of Celeste ID of Celeste that she'd shown in the court earlier by accident. I think Beth was trying to take a picture of it to prove that she hadn't redacted something she shouldn't have, but she wasn't supposed to be taking pictures. So then they had a beef of like, you're not allowed to take pictures, you're not allowed to have this stuff unredacted, you're going to try and redact this, edit this image and send it into the courthouse before they realize that you did this wrong. Blair was like, I'm not going to edit anything. I just wanted to do the redaction as I was told to do. I'm not editing. And basically the judge was like, you two are having a crazy beef from a trial that you had previously. You need to calm down, and any conversations you guys have are on the record. Can't even have you guys talking to each other off the record now because the beef is getting so out of control. That was crazy. But anyway, separate to that, they basically said, look, no photos, no chance. You guys need to just have professional conversations on the record. And that's about it. So we continued on from the blue pool. You know, jagged cuts out of it. Basically, it was just a, you know, a bloodbath in there, like blood on everything, absolutely everywhere. It was all glowing. We saw all of the pictures of it. So basically, I'll be honest, when Blair took over, I feel like she was just like clutching at straws like I'd never seen before. She was focusing on the most random stuff that really wasn't helpful. She was asking, you know, how do you log moving things around? Did you move everything around? Did you wear face masks, goggles? Did you take precautions? How do you know DNA is not going to be contaminated? Who was there first? Did you get briefed by the detectives? Did the detectives tell you to look at chainsaws? To look for chainsaws? It just wasn't like going anywhere. It was just talking around in circles. The judge kept saying, look, we already know there were 2 chainsaws with no DNA on them. We already heard this. Like, the judge was even getting a little bit like, what are you asking about? You're asking the same stuff over and over again. And they basically just kind of kept repeating themselves, to be honest with you. Kept saying, you know, what did the detectives tell you to search? Did you touch the same things as the detectives? And she was just being very honest up front, and I don't think she was caught out at any point. And I would say I noticed Blair was kind of pausing for very long periods of time. They said, did you know that David was a suspect before the search? They said, well, yeah, his Tesla was found with a body in it, registered to him at this, not at this address, but in Texas, but it was him living in this property. So yeah, he was a suspect. Like, that don't prove nothing. That don't prove no bias. Like, we all know what this case is all about. We were looking for blood. Somebody was found deceased in a frunk. So it was like Blair was thinking she was getting these gotchas, and then there was just nothing to it. So they used Blue Star in the rest of the house, in the living room. It didn't sound like they found blood anywhere else in the house. And again, Blair just kept repeating, well, Blue Star is presumptive. It doesn't prove blood for sure. It doesn't you didn't confirm human blood. No human blood's been confirmed whatsoever. They said many sprayed items didn't react, but they still collected them because they were similar to things that did have blood on them, and they wanted to do further analysis. Seemed very reasonable to me, to be completely honest with you. Some items they sprayed, they said that there were some tarps that didn't get sprayed that they still took anyway. They said that there was one trash bag that wasn't tested at all. They had a trash bag full of wet wipes that had what looked like blood on it. We saw a picture. It looked like, imagine you've used wet wipes to wipe up a bunch of blood and put them in a trash bag. That's what we saw. So they basically said a number of items were moved prior to testing, as if that was some big gotcha. And they basically said, yeah, detectives moved stuff. They said that the chainsaws were up on a shelf too high. They said they took a picture of them as they were, and then they moved them. I think Blair thought that they were going to say, oh, we didn't take a picture of their original position. But they were like, no, we got a picture of their original spot and where we moved them to. And it was kind of like, what are you going to say to that? So she basically just kept trying to find angles, and none of it was going anywhere. Blair seemed really surprised when she said I had a photo of the other location. Now, what was with the original location of the chainsaw? What was interesting is the dryer sheet that was apparently inside with the kiddie pool, like a little white. Imagine it's just like a piece of paper you'd put in with your laundry to stop it color running. They said that they didn't collect that, and that was almost like, oh, that's a big gotcha. And it's like, well, what use was that? I don't know. Maybe they should have collected it, but it really wasn't a big deal. It didn't really make any difference. It seemed like Blair, right at the end when it was ending up, she was trying to take some issue with like 2%. She was basically trying to take issue with some trash bag that had been collected, but basically it didn't really go anywhere. I feel like there was really not much for her to go on. So look, I'm about to lose battery on my camera, but that was basically everything that I could kind of get from my notes. There wasn't really anything else major. And it really was kind of Blair kind of flailing at the end there, and then that was the end of it. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for watching my coverage of this today. I should be back here tomorrow, hopefully. But if anything changes, I will let you guys know, but there will be back to the regular programming after that. But I really appreciate you guys trusting me with a news source. Thank you to everyone on my team who's helped me out today. It's been a really, really smooth day. Really, really happy with how everything went. And I'm going to wrap it up there before the camera dies. But thank you guys, and I'll see you soon.